Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with meditation teacher and mentor Neil McKinlay. He has spent his adult life studying and practicing meditation. He has led events of 100+ people, both in person and online. He has also been a parent and partner, author, and competitive swim coach. In recent years, Survivor has been added to Neil's list of roles and accomplishments as he recovers from a relationship with a dysfunctional spiritual mentor. These diverse experiences for Neil give him a very unique flavor. We get into all of this and so much more. Enjoy the interview.
First and foremost, Neil, thank you for taking a minute after the show. It's great to meet you. Thank you for taking some time out.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
So, Neil, the last 3 years, I think as we look at the calendar right now, we notice March 14th, we have flashbacks, PTSD, to when all of this began in 2020. And now that the world's waking up, how did you survive that 3-year COVID period, and how has it changed the way that you approach life and your work now?
Well, that's actually a huge problem, or a huge issue, Joe. For me, the COVID era was conflated and entwined with my departing or ending a 20-year relationship with a meditation community that turned out to be more of a cult than a community. So the recovery of the COVID era is intimately intertwined with that. And how I survived it was, it was just so overwhelming on both fronts. Not really knowing what to do, I turned to what was familiar, which means I meditated because I was at a loss for what else to do. And it was really interesting. I would turn toward, when we meditate, we turn toward our experience. And so I would turn toward my experience. I'd find this profound lostness that I just spoke to coming out of both of those circumstances. And I noticed that there were, kind of insights arising as I settled into that. And those insights, I'd never actually made this connection before, but those insights actually suggested next steps for me in my life in terms of how to do this, how to do my life, how to do this work, where to go next. And I started taking those steps. I started following those steps. If I needed to reach out, I'd reach out. If I needed to rest, I'd rest. If I felt like I should begin a meditation community of my own online that's based upon respect and encouraging individuals where they're at. That's what I started to do, and that has become really kind of core to the work that I do. I call it bringing meditation to life, letting the wisdom that we touch in meditation begin to do what it does, which is express and guide us into our lives.
So when you were growing up, what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream?
All I knew really was that I wanted to work with people. I never had a specific sense of what that would look like, but I wanted to work with people. I wanted to be of service to people. I wanted to help people in some way. That was always my longing, and I could never quite find a shingle to hang on it that felt appropriate, but it was always in that area.
So take me back to where you were born and raised and how some of these seeds in you that made you want to help people, how did those begin and how did those sprout into who you are today?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure where those seeds lay, but I do remember them beginning to sprout a little bit. So, I was a competitive swimmer through, my teen years into young adulthood. And it was an interesting time. It was the late 70s, early 80s when I was at my peak in that world. And sports psychology was just beginning to come into the mainstream. And I worked with a couple of coaches who were open to that kind of stuff. So we did things that some of which seem totally normal now, some of which still seem somewhat weird, all of which were weird at the time. We did visualization, we did goal setting, we did progressive relaxation, we did subliminal seduction, all this sort of subliminal messaging. And one of the things that was in that mix was meditation. And I vividly remember the evening we were away at a swim meet in Vancouver. And one of the coaches decided this would be a great time to teach us how to meditate, and so that's what he did. And I remember laying in my sleeping bag after that, in this conference room that we had rented for us to stay in for that particular competition, laying in my sleeping bag after that, just feeling like, okay, what I've just been offered here has something to share with the world. Like this thing called meditation, it has something to give the world. And I don't know what it is, but, that feeling was really strong, really prominent for me. And that was one of the first times I had that sense of, I wanted to be involved in something that was helpful, something that was of service, something that offered something to this world.
So, the one thing that's interesting about meditation is that, in all of the annals of mental health that we go through, even with like physical health, like yoga, for instance, which uses a lot of the mind. For the layperson out there that's curious about the benefits of meditation, which I've only heard 100% across the board, anybody that's ever talked about it, which usually is like, influential people and celebrities, you always kind of hear them talk about it. It's always such a good, refreshing way of kind of doing a reset. But if you were to put together just kind of a little overview for those out there that just aren't quite sure what meditation means, how would you sell it? How would you put it out there as something that is wholly beneficial to the human beings?
Well, I would say first, let's understand the mechanics of meditation. I think that's really helpful for letting us get a sense of what goes on in the practice. When we meditate, we turn our attention towards to a particular location. It's what's called the object of meditation. It's where we place our attention. The style of practice that I work with, we're putting our attention in our embodied experience, with the breath in the lower belly, with the sensation in the big toe, that sort of thing. So that's the basic dynamic of meditation. We take our normally wandering attention and we place it somewhere. The style of practice I do, we place it in our embodied lives. And what happens when that occurs is, our mind wanders a lot, and so we have to keep bringing it back. But eventually what happens is our attention begins to settle into that experience. Our attention begins to settle into whatever's happening for us in this moment. So if you're feeling happy, if you settle into happy. If you're feeling sad, you settle into sad. If you're feeling agitated, you settle into agitated. And as we settle, it's literally like we're going deeper and deeper into the strata of our being. And we eventually touch these basic qualities that exist in all of us. And by basic, I mean they exist in all of us. They exist in all of us at all times. So if we're having a good day, they're there. A bad day, they're there. If you've got long hair, they're there. Either short hair, they're there. We begin to settle into our experience and we touch these basic qualities. And we develop a deeper relationship with these qualities, and they actually become resources for us in our lives. So what are these basic qualities? Well, the first one we begin to notice is a sense of ease and well-being that we call relaxation. People will often say, I do meditation and meditation relaxes me. Well, I know where that statement's coming from, but it's not 100% accurate. What meditation does is put us in touch with the fundamental relaxation that exists within us. So we don't need to be relaxed. We're already relaxed. We just need to touch that part of ourselves. There's a whole raft of other qualities. We touch into a sense of clarity, seeing situations for what they are, sensitivity, feeling and attuning with the experience of others, and then a sense of responsiveness, ability to engage our lives based upon what we've seen clearly and what we've felt strongly. So meditation is this beautifully simple practice and one of the ways of understanding it is it's a practice that lets us settle into what's going on for us in this moment and find the resources and root ourselves in the resources that are just there waiting for us all the time. And then we bring them out into our lives. We let them flow into our lives.
That's a wonderful description. Who's been a role model or a hero for you in life?
I think there's several people that, I think of. One of the people that first comes to mind, I really admire a Christian writer by the name of Kathleen Norris, who is, I just think the way that she engages and lives her faith is beautiful and inspiring to me. There's a Buddhist nun that's somewhat similar named Pema Chodron, who is inspiring in that regard. And then I have always loved music, so I have kind of musical icons. One of the people that I admire deeply in that world is Bruce Springsteen. And I'm a huge Roger Federer fan. I'm not a huge tennis fan. I'm a huge Roger Federer fan, and I'm deeply affected by the beauty and grace that he used to bring to the court and to his game.
So you may have already answered this, but I'm going to ask you, if you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now and spend a little time with them, who would it be?
I would probably want to sit down with Roger.
I had a feeling.
Yep. I would probably want to sit down and have a chat with Mr. Federer. I think that would be a wonderful way to spend an afternoon.
So, I got something that I want to put out here, and I've never really talked about this with anybody that's been in the realm of meditation, but the one thing that I always do first thing in the morning, like after the alarm goes off and I know I need to wake up and do my thing, is sometimes I'll just kind of fall back into myself and count to 60. Is that something that you recommend first thing in the morning? I mean, what is your thought on that? Like, before you really start getting things going, is it good to just kind of collect yourself first thing in the morning and get to that point where you're restive and you're focused on what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think any sort of, again, the central dynamic of meditation is the act of turning toward our experience. My wandering attention is always going away. It's going somewhere else. So this act of turning toward our experience, and a lot of people, when we think about meditation, will think about, sitting up, sitting cross-legged, sitting on the floor, being quiet, doing this for 10 minutes, for 20 minutes, for 40 minutes. And I think that micro turning towards throughout our day is a really good practice to establish for ourselves. And it sounds like that's what you're describing. And so, lying in bed when you first wake up, lying in bed as you're falling asleep, sitting at your desk, when the lunch whistle goes and you have a couple moments as you're transitioning from one activity to the next, standing in the grocery line, waiting for the rice to cook, all these situations provide us just these little moments, these micro moments where we can do these little turning towards connecting with, settling in, and resourcing. I think they are highly, highly recommended.
It's the quiet poetry.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is it, speaking of waking up and getting into your day, what is it that motivates and fuels you through your day? What's the ultimate motivator?
I think the ultimate motivator, there's several motivators. I think one is this sense that I spoke to a few minutes ago, that meditation, that this work I'm involved with, has something to offer this life. It has something to offer this world, that those deep inner qualities, that basic qualities that I spoke to, I think that if you look at the world, it's pretty evident we're facing a lot of challenges right now. And I think we need to bring everything we are to the table as human beings. And one of the things that meditators or contemplatives can do is offer this sense of familiarity with and fidelity to the depths of our being and a willingness to bring it out into the world. So that motivates me. And then, honestly, my family motivates me. Trying to get up and be a decent, kind person on their behalf is a big motivator each and every day of my life.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the younger version of yourself, in your 20s, and you could impart some advice on that version of you based on the wisdom that you've gained, the roads you've been down, the things that you've overcome and enjoyed in your life. What would you tell your younger version?
But those moments where you knew you needed to step off this path now, and you stayed on it, take the leap, trust those moments, step off, and go in a different direction. It'll be worth it. So at the end of that said day that motivates you, when you look back on a day,
How do you quantify it as a good day?
A good day is one where I feel like I've stayed fairly close to what's actually going on for me. A less than good day is a day where I've let that wandering attention take the front seat and just drift willy-nilly left, right, and center.
I love that answer. So of all of the things that you've accomplished in your life, all of the things that you've done, when you lean back in that proverbial easy chair at the end of the day and think about all of it, what are you the proudest of?
My role as a parent. My role as a parent. So,
of all of the work that you've done, what's been one of the best client responses, quote-unquote fan letters you've ever gotten?
I was thinking about this just the other day. I was talking to my wife about this. I think it wasn't a fan letter per se, but it was definitely a response. One of the things that I try to do is, understandably, given what I've said, one of the things I try to do in my work is encourage people to trust their own inherent sense of things, their own inherent wisdom, and share this with the world. And I have an online community that I facilitate called the Online Gatherings. And we were having a conversation this weekend, a discussion period, and at a certain point, those who were gathered there very much started talking amongst themselves. It wasn't a teacher-centered conversation. It wasn't mediated by me. People were sharing their experience and their wisdom, and people were responding to that, and people were responding back. And I said to my wife, that was one of the best pieces of feedback I've ever received, because it was a sense that people are feeling comfortable, encouraged, and empowered to share who they are and share what they know and share what there is in them to be offered to the world.
So speaking of offering it to the world, you are a person that has different perceptions that are drawn about you, whether it's family, friends, clients, colleagues, but ultimately you're the one that leads and drives the bus. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
A kind and sensitive soul, old soul, who is also capable in ways that I don't always appreciate.
That's great. To the point. That was like a tweet right there. That was great. So I got to tell you real quick, you said Springsteen, and it kind of popped into my head. Right after the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, we had a big parade. The town was in euphoria. We're kind of coming down off of it now. But at the end of that week, I was going downtown, and there was a homecoming for a jazz trumpeter by the name of Herman Mahari. He was coming back home. He moved to Paris. And all of this traffic was downtown. And I was telling my wife, I was like, what is going on? Because usually Kansas City's not known for gridlock traffic, and there was a lot going on. And after we got into this show at this place called The Folly downtown, I realized shortly thereafter that Bruce Springsteen was in town, and that was the traffic. And I was always told in my life, and I haven't done it yet, that I have to see the boss live. Have you seen him live?
I've never seen him live, believe it or not.
Man, I used to run a youth program, a teen program at a YMCA. I ran a couple computer labs, and there was a guy that ran the front desk, and he was the savant guy. But he saw all these concerts. We used to talk music all the time, and he used to always tell me, you have to see Springsteen in concert. It's kind of like the Rolling Stones. You just can't even imagine the energy and what they do, and he just takes it to a whole other level. I mean, he caters to a crowd in a way that no other live performer can. So anyway, I was just curious when you said Springsteen if you had seen him, because I have to do that. It's got to be something I do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the story is he'll be doing a round of stadiums during the summer, so you may get another kick at the can.
Yeah, for sure. That would be great. I would love to get there and do that. Man, I haven't thought about kick the can for a long time. That put a smile on my face. So, that's good. Hey, Neil, before we get out of this proverbial digital door here, I want to make sure that if anyone wants to learn more about you and your meditation services and anything revolving around your world, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me in all the usual places like Facebook, Instagram, the usual podcast outlets. But the best way is to check my website. And that is neilmckinlay.com. I'm a rare McKinlay. That's an L-A-Y at the end, Neil McKinlay. Because what I do, this notion of bringing meditation to life is really a very broad mandate. What I offer is pretty wide-ranging, and the best place to get a good sense of this is through the site. Everything from the online gatherings to a bunch of free offerings and so on and so forth. And while you're there, if you're so inclined, sign on to my newsletter, because in addition to giving you a gradual introduction to what I do, it'll give you a sense of upcoming events and special offers, and really importantly, that newsletter reminds you that meditation's always there. People say to me, I appreciate getting your newsletter. Sometimes I don't open it. Just having it in my inbox reminds me that meditation's always there to bring into my life. And that, to me, is a real value plus. So neilmckinlay.com would be the main way.
Yeah, I would think in this new 2023 era, and there's a sense that I believe we're going to hit some level of new enlightenment. I've heard that. I feel it. I think we've gone through some things that will help us to another healthier place, and I would imagine meditation would be a really big, good, healthy kind of post-pandemic activity for the human mind to wrap their brains around it.
Well, I think so, and as I said before, I feel like it's one piece of the multi-piece puzzle of what we humans need to bring to the table to meet some of the challenges we're facing, and the range of what the practice offers is really quite broad, from just a sense of being more comfortable in our own skin, more at ease in our own skin, to actually feeling and connecting with our profound interrelationship with one another, which I do feel the pandemic provided us a live glimpse of the truth of that fact.
Absolutely. Neil, I'm so glad we caught up. I really appreciate you being flexible, taking time out to talk with me today. Best of luck with everything. It's a fascinating story you've got.
Thank you very much. You take care, Joe, and thanks to all your listeners for listening.
Absolutely. And if for some reason I see the boss live, I'll drop you a line.
Please do. Please do. And if you happen to see Roger on the way, let him know. I'd love to do lunch.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Subscribe to us. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.